Now we're going to talk about fulcrums. Fulcrum is kind of a ubiquitous word in the world of drumming where everybody says, oh yeah, that's that right there where you hold the stick. And a lot of it's like, well, yeah, kind of, sort of, sometimes. But even then, I rarely run into people who have a proper fulcrum that really does its job. Now the fulcrum's job is it allows the fingers to play the stick instead of holding the stick. So fulcrum is just a pivot point. So technically you got one fulcrum here, then you got another fulcrum here in the wrist, then another in the arm, etc. But for our purposes, we're going to be talking about the one in the front of the hand, first or second finger, where the stick pivots and allows the fingers to be used. Now, I just mentioned two different common fulcrums, and a lot of people love to select one or the other as if one is superior. Okay, first finger fulcrum is here in the first finger, and second finger fulcrum is here more in the second finger. Now both have their purpose and their application, and you definitely want to have both well developed. The short generalization would be that the first finger fulcrum is good for low, light, finesseful finger control playing, okay? And the second finger's fulcrum is good for just more holding the stick when there's a lot more wrist and a lot bigger strokes. When you don't need micromanagement, you don't need this first finger fulcrum, okay? Now, so you definitely want to have both of them programmed, and you'll switch on the fly just depending on what your hands need to do in any given millisecond. A lot of people will talk about a gap. So is there a gap between the thumb and the hand there, the first finger, or no gap? And generally with first finger fulcrum, there will not be a gap. With second finger fulcrum, there will be a gap because the first finger is doing nothing. Now, I've seen a lot of people say, you know, if you have no gap, it means you're tight, which is completely wrong. And I think that's coming out of a generalization where if my hand is tight, there are going to be no gaps anywhere. But the problem is I've seen a lot of people trying to take that advice. I've had Skype students from all over the world come to me, and you know, a lot of them have had tendonitis or something, and they come to me to try to get a fix up. And what they're doing is they're maintaining that gap in order to stay loose, but they're using first finger fulcrum and they're squeezing the daylights out of the stick while operating elsewhere in the wrist in order to maintain that, you know, because if you don't squeeze enough, it'll just slide right up there and you're out of luck, okay? So no gap does not mean you're tight at all, period, okay? Not tight. So the idea with the gap or no gap is it pretty much relates to the thumb, okay? Now, when you have no gap and you're using first finger fulcrum and you're doing a lot of finger control micromanagement, there will generally be no gap because you're getting that thumb a little bit more to the top side of the stick such that the stick can pivot under the thumb, giving the fingers way better access and way better control, okay? And when you're not doing a lot of finesse stuff where you need that finger control, you just hold a little bit further back in the hand. And that way, you know, when the first finger does nothing, sure there'll be a gap because who cares? The idea is, you know, hold on to the stick just enough to do what you want to do. So first finger fulcrum generally has no gap, and it's for a lot of finger micromanagement. If you play, you know, having a big gap there and squeezing would require a lot of extra tension, okay? And if I'm just playing, don't need finger control, so why on earth would I squeeze there and have any extra effort or micromanagement, okay? So both fulcrums have their place, and you really want to have both of them dialed in. Now let's look at the different fulcrums specifically in the different grips. When you're in German, the thumb is on the side of the stick, and at that point, it's not really good for finger control anyway in that position, but the danger is if you push down, you'll slide up to there, and at that point, you're out of luck for that first finger control. Now I mentioned this a little bit in the 3 grips lesson, but it really comes down to what the fulcrum will be able to do. And German is not a good place with the thumb on the side, and that becoming the ceiling. Now with French, here you are with your hands vertical, and it really pivots under the thumb, which is fantastic for fingers because they're totally free to play the stick. There's no lateral squeezing necessary. Now American grip, here you are right here, And the thumb is kind of at a 45-degree angle. And at this point, we can go no gap, which puts the thumb a little bit more on the top side, so you get the advantage of French, where the stick is held down under the thumb and the fingers get absolute access, especially that trigger finger. Or it can just relax and open up a little gap and let the stick come up past it when you want more stick height. So that's where that American grip, you know, it's kind of about what the fulcrum does, giving you the options for either side. But, you know, without that fulcrum, you're going to be in trouble. The fingers will not get to play the stick with the freedom they have. So don't obsess about a gap or no gap, okay? Second finger naturally will have a gap, okay? First finger, occasionally if you're playing really light and lazy, it'll have a little gap it'll open up. But anytime you're playing stuff that requires finesse, your thumb should really be on top governing the stick, such that the fulcrum is a little bit more under the thumb than on the side of the thumb, giving the fingers the best access. And I always train first finger fulcrum first. I actually isolate it. You'll see more about this in my Extreme Hands Makeover process. But I always train the front of the hand first, and then it's real easy to naturally fall into second finger fulcrum. But those people who just elect second finger fulcrum like it's the one size fits all, be all answer, they end up with the first finger that's generally helpless, and that's why they struggle to play a lot of things really quickly. So train that first finger fulcrum. Oh yeah, and also, it's kind of a little bit in between the first and second knuckle. When people say it's in that crease right there, at that point, the index finger cannot wrap under the stick and it can't really play the stick. So depending on the diameter of the stick, it does end up a little bit in between somehow, just so that the index finger, pad of that index finger, trigger finger, can play the stick. So train your first finger fulcrum really, really well, and then naturally, when you don't need to use it, you just sort of hold a little bit further back. And a lot of times, if you're just playing, there's no real fulcrum anyway. It's just all four fingers barely holding onto the stick. But have all the tools developed so that whatever you need, you got it good to go when you need it. Airplane.